Businesses are faced with this challenge every day. Where do we locate to find the talent we need? Yet the talent they need cannot afford to live close to their jobs. So why don't they just hop on the nearest bus? Well, that's the wrong answer because Mississauga and many municipalities fall short on the transit and transportation front. To help us understand the scope of this issue and what's being done to help is Sean Meagher. Sean is the executive director of the Change Lab and coordinator of Metamorphosis, a network that brings together over 100 not-for-profit organizations across Peel Region. And he joins us today. Welcome, Sean.
Thanks very much, David. It's great to be here.
Sean, first of all, help us understand what Metamorphosis is and why you decided to bring this group together.
So Metamorphosis brings together nonprofit community service providers all across Peel Region. And they came together because they were realizing that they had a lot in common in terms of the challenges that they were facing. Peel's a big urban center. Mississauga and Brampton and increasingly Caledon are major population centers, but they don't have the same kind of infrastructure that cities like Toronto or Ottawa or even Hamilton have to support the success of the community. And our members are all looking at how do we support people to be able to engage in this growing, vibrant city. And what we're finding is we really don't have all the tools that other folks have, and we need to figure out how to make sure that Mississauga and Brampton and Caledon get those.
The research that you've done, there's a number of areas to focus on, but two of the areas that you've focused on is housing and also childcare. Help us understand why those are the two big ones that you're focusing on at the current time. And I think it was in one of our conversations I heard the term. It moved away from affordable housing to attainable housing, and I really like that term because it gets, it separates out the different types of housing that is available. So help us understand how you landed on affordable or attainable housing and childcare first.
Yeah, so those are two of the significant challenges in Peel Region that affect families, individuals who are trying to get housing, trying to get their kids into care, but also affect the success of our economy. As you mentioned at the top of the podcast, if people can't live here, it's harder for them to work here. It's harder to draw new workers here if they can't afford a place to stay. And what we saw in the research was the reality is that there are as many people in Peel on a per capita basis that are struggling with housing as there are in Toronto, and more than there are in Hamilton or Ottawa or York Region. But we don't have the same kind of housing infrastructure. In fact, we have about a third as much housing per capita as places like Toronto and Ottawa, even though we have as much demand. And so that's going to be a real challenge. And the same challenge that we face with childcare. There are a lot of kids in Peel. It's a growing community. It's a young community, increasingly a young community. But we have about 6,000 childcare spaces fewer than we would have if we had the per capita allocation of even Ottawa, which is the next worst jurisdiction. And one of the things we found was that the reason we're doing so poorly is that when the province invests in the kinds of services that enable people to access attainable or affordable housing, to access childcare, they do it based on infrastructure, not based on population. So they don't look at how many people are struggling to be able to afford housing. They just look at how many community housing units there are, and there's a formula for what they fund for that. Well, that's great, except that Toronto has 60,000 public housing units, another 40,000 nonprofit units. Peel has 14,000 combined compared to Toronto's 100. And so it's not as big a magnet for provincial investment because the infrastructure isn't there, but there's no investment in the infrastructure to help us catch up. So we stay behind the eight ball forever.
The impact to Mississauga and Mississauga businesses is quite substantial as well. Whenever we engage businesses, they come at it from sometimes a different point of view. Some of them are socially active and they're very concerned about their communities, but most businesses look at it in cold, hard dollars. How can you make me more money? How can you save me money? So please speak to the economic impact that this is having on these businesses in Mississauga and why these two issues can significantly help them.
Yeah, and in the study that we just released, it's called Opportunities and Risks, because there's both available in Mississauga. But in that study, we look, among other things, at that bottom line. What does it cost folks? Because there are a whole bunch of different ways that businesses are in fact paying the price for this. Part of it is just in the success of the community. If there are homeless people on the street, if there are people in encampments in the parks, if people can't afford to come and live here, that's not a good environment for business. And that's one kind of challenge. There's another kind of challenge, which is that businesses in Mississauga don't pay less tax than businesses in Ottawa or Toronto or Hamilton, but they get less investment. And because there's less investment, because those challenges are here, the municipality has had to step in places and reinforce some of that social infrastructure, which means that businesses in Mississauga are paying twice and getting less because the province just really hasn't recognized what the scope of challenges are here and made the investments here that matter. The other thing that we see is just the loss to the economy overall. If you can't attract workers, or if workers can't come to work, because they can't get childcare, or they can't get home care for their senior parents, they can't get long-term care for their senior parents. Those things are all pulling people away from the workforce. We did a calculation based on research that shows that Mississauga's GDP could grow by about $120 million if we just allowed the workforce to grow the way it should by having space for people to have support for caregiving.
Sean, Mayor Parrish, the mayor of Mississauga, recently convened a task force on housing. How have you engaged with the city with their housing task force and the issues that you are attempting to solve?
Yeah, and I have to say a giant thank you to the municipal sector here in Peel Region. City of Mississauga, the Region of Peel, the City of Brampton, Town of Caledon have all been really big supporters of this work. They've helped to contribute to the funding, but also to sharing the information with the public. And you've probably seen signs on buses and highway overpasses saying, what kind of community are we trying to build to bring people into this conversation? So there's been a lot of dialogue with them. We've shared this research with them as a way to inform both the task force and the general work of the region and the city, and sat down with Mayor Parrish and with Mayor Brown, and with Mayor Groves and with Chair Yannicka to make sure that we are getting this information into the hands of policymakers. And we've been sitting down with the MPPs as well. There's no point in sitting there saying, oh, the province isn't doing that, the province isn't doing this. The goal is to find solutions. And so we've been sitting down with our MPPs to say, okay, this is the challenge. How do we get Minister Bethlenfalvy in the budget that's coming down now on March 26th to make sure that he's investing in Peel so that the opportunities that are here, because they're legion here in Mississauga, are fully realized because we have the infrastructure to achieve those goals.
Sean, Minister Flack was recently hosted by the Mississauga Board of Trade, and this issue that you're working on lands squarely within his portfolio. What's the reception been from the minister's office?
So we haven't heard back from Minister Flack. We did send copies of our research to all of the ministers who are affected, and also to the Premier. But we haven't heard back from a lot of the ministers yet. And that's one of the asks that we have of our local MPPs is, let's get a table. Let's get Minister Flack, but also Minister Calandra, because we're seeing those challenges in education, Minister Parsa, because we're seeing those challenges in community services, to a table, and let's work on a plan. One of the things we know for sure is that these are big problems, and we don't expect them to be solved in one budget by one minister. But what we do know is that if you're trying to get somewhere, it's good to have a plan, or else you're unlikely to get there. And so we're eager to get our MPPs, to get their ministers to a table where we can all have a conversation about how do we get the support to Mississauga that it so richly deserves. And Mississauga is, I think it's about 5% of the province's population, but it's 7% of the GDP. If we can't make Mississauga work, we're not going to make Ontario work. And that's worth investing in.
Sean, if people want more information on metamorphosis and the work that you're doing, what's the website they can go to?
They can go to communitymetamorphosis.ca. And if they have questions, they can email us at info@communitymetamorphosis.ca.
We've been in conversation with Sean Meagher. Sean is with the Metamorphosis Project. Sean, thanks for being with us.
Thanks a lot. And thanks for the work that you do.